So if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh for the past decade, you know that Upstart Goblin has played a vital role in the meta scene, since it gave you instant access to an extra card. And while it wasn't always that popular, it mainly saw meta success around 2010 and 2011, back when the game became far more combo oriented, and it was primarily because of the power creep which sped up the game. Upstart Goblin became so popular that it was largely considered to be a staple card in every deck, mainly since it sped up your deck and it made it far more consistent. And giving your opponent 1,000 life points wasn't such a big deal anymore, since you could get quicker access to your resources. And in fact, Upstart Goblin was so vital to this process that it swept the competitive scene for a decade, and it showed no signs of stopping. And Upstart Goblin hit such a stride, especially in the mid-2010s, that many players often said that it turned a 40 card deck into a 39 card deck, since it allowed you to gain early access to an extra card in your opening hand, and it was at the start of the duel typically, and you could potentially outpace your opponent by digging through your deck, especially since it was at the time when both players could draw on their opening turn. And this is what put Upstart Goblin on top of the world at the time. And while this really old card had a long time in the meta spotlight, it's recently fallen off in the past year or so, and now it's nowhere near as popular as it once was. And this marks the rise and fall of Upstart Goblin. So why do I say that Upstart Goblin has fallen off? I say this because it's become a lot more apparent that Upstart isn't being used in as many decks as it used to be. If you look at the modern day deck build, you don't really see this card in very many decks, if any decks at all. And this is a huge stark contrast from the past, since it used to be in almost every deck. But why has this changed? In short, it relates to the power creep, since the power creep usually causes large changes in the game. And just the power creep alone ushered in the age of draw power. And that's what happened in the previous decade. That was the previous strategy, the more predominant one. And it also helped usher in the age of search power, which is what we currently find ourselves in. And that's what constitutes modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! And although we know that search power has always been important, it's become critical and borderline necessary in the modern day. And it's starting to become a new norm instead of the typical draw power strategy. And think about it. Think about how many search effects happen within a turn. And think about how important search effects are in your opening turn. They're absolutely vital to your strategies, and it's absolutely crucial in order to survive against your opponent's overwhelming board. And looking at all of these instances, you can't help but notice that you wind up using more search effects than draw effects in order to get your strategy going. And you can see why searchability has become far more favorable. If you look at cards like Upstart Goblin, yeah, they allow you to draw an extra card, but you don't really know which card you're going to get. And if you look at cards like Reinforcements of the Army, it allows you to directly search out a specific card. And this is the benefit. Searchabilities allow you to get a specific card, while draw cards give you a card, and it could be a card that you need or you don't need at the time. And the point here is that search effects provide certainty, which means that you will be able to access the necessary cards to complete your desired strategy. And draw cards don't really provide this sort of strategy. They don't really provide certainty. Draw cards just aren't as reliable, and it's mainly because they don't provide that certainty. Thus, you're less likely to kick off your strategy, and it's hit or miss, which is undesirable for a modern day strategy that largely seeks to establish a large board presence. And it certainly doesn't help if you're trying to make an unbreakable board. And this is why I say Upstart Goblin has fallen out of favor. It's being outcompeted by search cards, which are far more reliable in helping you achieve your desired end board. And it doesn't help that Upstart Goblin doesn't really give you more card advantage, since it's a +0. And because of this fact, competitive players look to search cards like Pendulum Call to specifically search out the card they need, instead of taking a gamble and playing something like Upstart Goblin, where you may or may not get the card you need. And although you can make a very tight deck that's very consistent, it doesn't outshine the certainty that search cards bring to the table. So the idea is, you might as well replace Upstart Goblin with a search card so that you can see the cards you need with much more certainty. If players are going to be netting a 0 card advantage, they might as well be getting the card they need. And despite how much I respect Upstart Goblin, I don't see it becoming any more relevant in later years. Search cards are already vastly outpacing it, and powerful summon effects are also taking priority over draw power. And the sad truth is, this phenomena is likely to be true for most, if not all, draw cards. Every format you see less and less draw power, or draw cards in general, in the modern day Yu-Gi-Oh decks, and the only main draw cards you really see in the meta are things like Pot of Prosperity or even Extravagance. And it's just like what Paul from Team APS said in a recent video. Even cards like Allure of Darkness are starting to fall out of favor in Yu-Gi-Oh! And he goes into much more detail about draw cards in the video called The Death of Draw Cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And you could even say that this video was kind of inspired by his video, since he kind of wondered if anyone else noticed this phenomena. Though he chose to focus on draw cards in general, but I chose to focus on one impactful card that I thought was meaningful. But in short, I do agree with him on this phenomena, and it's very real, and I definitely noticed it throughout the years, and especially within the last year. But as always, these have been my thoughts on this topic, and I wanted to make this video that related to this phenomena since I found it very interesting, and who knows, maybe I'll make another video that goes into more depth than I already have. But with that pretty much wraps it up for this video. If you would like to support more content like this in the future, you can do so at my Necromancer 1040 Patreon link down below. I normally post it in the description, and you can check it there along with the other cool things I normally post down below. And with that, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Alright, take care.